to no good. So exciting.
Hello guys, my name is TheRussianBadger and welcome back to Battlefield Hardline. I was recently given the opportunity just about a month ago at the end of October to fly out to EA in California for another one of these recording events that I'm sure you guys have heard about. They're not as glamorous as you might think. I mean, there's no fireworks, there's no champagnes, there's no popping bottles. It's basically you play Battlefield Hardline, you talk about Battlefield Hardline, you eat, and then you rinse and repeat for 2 days. And I know in this video you might be thinking that I'm adopting a more serious tone than I usually do. I know you're probably going to say, you know, who are you and what have you done with Badger? But if you would be so kind, I would really be thankful if you would stay until the end of the video, because I have a call to action for you, and I think it's in all of our best interests if you would go ahead and just lend me your voice and your ears for the duration of this entire video, because I think there's some things that need to be said about the game, and I think it's very important for you to hear about them. So I'm gonna start out just by, you know, getting the silliness out of the way. Obviously, Epic Wormman, he's not going to be in the retail version. There was a bit of a glitch here with the LED5 where it contorted your thumb in kind of a weird fashion, and you know, obviously it elongated your entire torso, so you look like Epic Wormman. They've since patched this, so this is not going to be in retail, sadly, but I figured I'd just show it with you guys. So I wanted to show you some of the features that I'm sure you want to hear about, the new game mode, and then get into sort of serious business, if you will even try to take me seriously in that specific capacity. And Chavo got his head stomped on, by the way, but I think a lot of you are going to want to hear about these camos that you're seeing in all these different Battlefield Hardline videos that I'm sure are releasing right now simultaneously at 9 a.m. PDT on the 3rd, December 3rd today. I do think the gold plating is very interesting to see, but not all the weapons have it perfectly on their specific sort of, all of the different components of the weapon perfectly. And the pig zebra is another one that I found pretty interesting. So just to give you, as it stands right now, some of the camos that you're probably interested in. You know, there's gold-plated, silver-plated, bronze-plated. There is rattlesnake, circuit, zebra. There's pink zebra and green zebra. And then, you know, the whole run-of-the-mill of, you know, different shades of a snow, different shades of, like, desert, you know, like a woodland. There's other ones like these hexagon sports. You know, there's all different kinds, but I mean, you get the idea that there are a different sort of... They took the whole camo pattern into a different direction as compared to Battlefield 4. Now, this new game mode, which is called Hotwire, I have to say, you're probably not going to believe me, but I do really genuinely enjoy Hotwire. It's essentially just Conquest, but instead of flags standing in a stationary position in sort of a land area, it's just a vehicle that you can drive around. Now, you have to drive at a certain speed in order to collect points. I mean, obviously, this guy in the big rig, you have to get it going a little bit longer than big rig, just because, obviously, it's a massive vehicle. It takes way longer with the acceleration. But just staying at a certain speed and driving around the map, it's going to get you a lot more points. I think it's a lot more dynamic game mode, and it's... I don't want to say less boring, because Conquest is not necessarily boring, especially in the context of Battlefield 4, but, you know, in so many situations where you find yourself just kind of sitting there, and then the entire, like, basically the entire map and the rest of the enemies and all of your teammates have moved to a different section of the map, and it gets kind of boring just capping a flag by yourself. I think this really solves it, and I really do genuinely think that Hotwire is going to be a very fun game mode once you guys get your hands on it, because it's much more dynamic. It's just Conquest with flags that are cars instead of stationary little pieces of area or land on the map. I think it's a great game mode that has a lot of potential. But moving on to serious business, this is really what I want to talk about this in the video right now, is Battlefield Hardline has the potential to be an extremely good first-person shooter, but I'm worried as it is right now. And there is one little thing that I would like you guys to do. If you would be so kind, please do this one thing for me. I would be so thankful. I would like you to tweet at this one individual, and his name is Thaddeus Sasser. Now, Thaddeus Sasser is essentially the Alan Kurtz of Battlefield Hardline. So, Thaddeus Sasser is to Hardline as Alan Kurtz is to Battlefield 4. He's essentially the guy that is fully in charge of multiplayer and the direction that it's going. And I like Thad so much more than Alan Kurtz, not necessarily because I have any sort of like grudge against Alan Kurtz or I think he's a bad person. You know, I've met him before. I think he's a great guy, but I think he adopted the wrong attitude when it came to Battlefield 4 as to exactly how the game should be managed and sort of shaped into its final product. I think oftentimes Alan Kurtz had the idea that if anybody said something should be changed or altered in Battlefield 4, it was a personal attack on him, like somehow he did something massively wrong and his game is completely broken. I think he had the wrong attitude as to exactly how Battlefield 4 should be mended into something that is a great game that everybody can enjoy for, 2 or 3 years down the road, not just, like 10 months, 11 months like it was, at least in my opinion. Obviously the game of Battlefield 4 is really dying down right now. Now, on the contrary, I think Thaddeus Sasser, who's in charge at Visceral for the multiplayer, who I'm going to ask you to tweet, by the way, he has a much, much more positive attitude as to exactly how the game is going to turn out. He understands that when I say something, whether it's about the vehicles or moving around the map or the weapons or the maps themselves, whatever the case may be, he understands that it is all about improving the experience for the player, and it's about improving the game. It's not a personal attack on him. I'm not calling him, incompetent, or I'm saying, oh, you did such a bad job with this. He understands that we're all just trying to make the game better so that the entire community, anybody that picks up this game, can have a much more enjoyable experience. So this is the person that I'm going to ask you to go tweet at. His name is Thaddeus Sasser. He is a prince of a guy. Please go tell him to keep the bullet damage low like it was in the beta. And I know that sounds really odd, like that is the entire climax of my point, but here's what I'm gonna say. If it's like an RPG or a certain assault rifle or a certain little gadget that is unbalanced or overpowered or a little broken, that really doesn't matter. That doesn't matter to me. I don't think it matters to really anybody else that has genuine concern for Battlefield Hardline, because all of that is so easily fixed. But when it comes to bullet damage has such a massive impact as to exactly how the game is played, how it feels for everybody, how players move around the map, and it drastically affects the overall gameplay experience that anybody that picks up this game is going to have. And I know that might not seem like it's much. I know it seems like a very simple thing. It's just bullet damage, Badger, but I think it has such a massive impact on the overall gameplay experience. It's critically important. It is utterly important to get it right. And here's how I'll explain my point. I'll articulate my point as to why you should keep it low and why it was so great in the beta. Okay, so obviously with the cycle of the development of this particular game, Battlefield Hardline, there's obviously no way they can change to another game engine. I mean, it's Battlefield Hardline, it's going to be running on Frostbite. And Frostbite has great features, and it unlocks a lot of great little pieces that we really enjoy in our games. So for example, it makes games beautiful and very interactive. Like, you have to admit, Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, they're very, very beautiful games, and they're very, very fun to interact with. Now, I'm not just saying Levolution, because I think, personally, I'm not a big fan of Levolution, but Battlefield Hardline is very great in, the Frostbite game engine is very great in those respects, but the Frostbite game engine also falls short very, 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 very strongly when it comes to gunplay mechanics. And I think just the way that certain players interact with each other in terms of the gunplay, which is so central to a first-person shooter. So even in Battlefield 4, you can still recognize that so often, whether it's your bullets not registering, or you feel as if you're being one-shot, or you're being shot around corners, that is such a core aspect of the game that if you didn't get it right like you did in Battlefield 4, the whole like getting shot around corners and getting one shot, like all of these features that make the core gunplay mechanics frustrating to play, and it just doesn't make the game all that enjoyable. You can see that it really decreases the lifespan of the game, and it makes it so much worse than it potentially otherwise could be. But did you guys notice in the Battlefield Hardline beta that everything was so much smoother because the bullet damage was lower? I can say that I was pretty sure that I was top 10 in the world for game time played during the Hardline beta. I'm not necessarily proud of that, but I was probably like top 10 in the world for the most hours that were put into the Battlefield Hardline beta. And I have to say, there were very, very few instances where I ever felt as if I got one shot by an assault rifle or just insta-killed, you know, unjustly insta-killed, or shot around corners, or I ever had an instance where I just blurted out, you know what, excuse my language here, but I very rarely had an instance where I was like, bullshit, there's no way I should have died there. That happened so few times, it's almost like I was playing a different game when compared to Battlefield 4. Now, obviously they're on the same engine, so they should interact in the same way, but I still want to emphasize that point, that obviously Battlefield Hardline is stuck with a Frostbite engine. That is, I mean, there's no way getting around it now. So I think the easiest way to make Battlefield Hardline into a tremendous success is to keep the bullet damage low, because that way everything is smoother with the core gameplay experience and the core gameplay experience of gun interaction between players. You know, I'm thinking about so many different aspects of like what makes a first-person shooter, not even Battlefield, not even this franchise specifically, but when it comes to a first-person shooter, as long as you get, and especially with a scale, I'm thinking about it this way, as long as you get the maps, the vehicles, and the gunplay correct, everything else will fall into place. Everything else will take care of itself. And that's one thing that I really did want to emphasize, is that making sure that they get the gun interaction right is such a determining factor as to whether this game will have lots of staying power and people will be playing it for years, or if it'll sort of die out in 9 to 10 months like Battlefield did. I know a lot of you still have some real, like, you're still kind of in denial about that, but if you look at the dwindling numbers for Battlefield 4, it's obvious that most players have moved on to other titles, and it's kind of sad to see, but I think it's definitely very, very truthful. So this is my plea to you. I would like you to go over to Thaddeus Sasser on Twitter. I will leave his info down in the description. And please tell him to keep the bullet damage low, like it was in the beta. Because I know you're just going to have to take a leap of faith because you haven't played this latest build. Because the latest build is so much, the bullet damage is so much higher than it was in the beta. But you're just going to have to take my word for it. I think you need to trust me in this specific instance to understand that I've played it pretty extensively, the newest build, and I do truly think that it is in all of our best interests to keep the bullet damage low, to mitigate all of the quote-unquote netcode symptoms, and to make everything run smoother so that everybody can have a greater experience with Battlefield Hardline when it actually hits the shelves in March. And I know, yet again, you haven't played it, so you haven't really understood exactly whether you like the higher bullet damage, which is more of it caters to more of a twitchy player versus the lower bullet damage, which caters to more of an accurate player. But this is my personal plea to you. Please go tweet at Thaddeus Sasser to keep the bullet damage low like it was in the beta, and I think everybody will be better off. That's sort of my whole rant about Battlefield Hardline. It's a little bit longer than I'd anticipated. Hopefully you understood all of my different points. I know I'm not the very best at remaining clear and concise, but I think that I said everything that I needed to say. So I wanted to thank you guys very much for watching. If you guys have any questions about Battlefield Hardline, about any of the little features, I still have lots and more gameplay that I have not showed you yet. So if you would like to ask me any kind of questions as to exactly what has changed and what smaller details you want to know about, please leave a comment down below and I will do my very best to answer whatever kind of questions you guys have. But other than that, I want to thank you guys very much for watching. I will see you guys next time. Auf Wiedersehen und bis bald und Shader.